Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and since it's Women's History Month, I'm here today to talk to you about Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, Episode 1. What is Episode 1 called? Down the Rabbit Hole. So, this was a spin-off show that came out in 2014 of the much successful Once Upon a Time. This series only sadly lasted for one season. Fans were mixed along with critics. Personally, I really enjoyed this show and I really loved it. And I loved it in a time when Once Upon a Time wasn't doing so great. Around this time, Once Upon a Time was in its third season, and it really goofed up its third season. It was split in half. The first half in the Neverland storyline was terrible, but then the second half was actually really enjoyable. But I don't even remember what the second half of the storyline was about. It might be the Frozen storyline, or it might be the Wizard of Oz storyline. I can't really remember. But Once Upon a Time used to be really good in its first two seasons, but then it just kind of goofed up around its third. But then it really goofed up around its second because the curse was broken. And they're like, okay, well, if the curse is broken, why aren't they going back to their normal lives back in the storyland, like, book and stuff? And so they tried to be different and ambitious, and they kept the story going. But as the series kept progressing, the show just kept making one mistake after another. It took chances and risks, but it didn't really allow those chances to have any weight to them because they just kept reversing everything. And also, the rules of magic kept changing. It was told to get back into the storyland, magical world, you had to have a certain item to get you there. Then as the many seasons kept passing, they kept changing that idea. And so I said, what's the rules of magic? Then the whole, oh, you remember your life back in the storyland and you don't. And it's bad guys will turn good and they'll be sympathetic. So then you didn't want them to die, and then they would die only to come back to life. And it's just the show just kept messing itself up. So Wonderland was a breath of fresh air for me. And it really sucks that fans couldn't get into it. One of the main criticisms I saw one person comment on when it came to Wonderland is that they didn't like how everything was told in the present day. See, the format of Once Upon a Time is that about 80 or 90% of the show is told in flashbacks, and the rest of the percents is in the present day, which it flipped when it went to Wonderland and people wanted more flashbacks. I personally didn't. I got tired of flashbacks. The flashbacks are good. The flashback is what helped make the show, but it was a nice different pace to have everything set in the present. Also, Wonderland was more action-packed because Alice is a warrior and everything, and not just some helpless young lady and stuff. And when it came to the Once Upon a Time show, this is around the time, I think it came out in 2011. And this is one of the times that I started to notice female empowerment in television media. Because the show mainly focused around the female characters and how they were warriors. And a lot of the guys will either be villains or they'll be the damsel in distress. And a lot of because this deals in the fairy tale world. And so a lot of these people who are heroes in the fairy tale world, like Peter Pan, are actually the villains now. And they kept changing things up. And they kept mashing certain characters together. And Wonderland was a mashup of many different characters. And it's probably confused a lot of people, but they should have been used to that by now, And it's quite a shame that Wonderland had to meet its dust way before Once Upon a Time, because this show is not out on DVD. It's no longer free to watch on the ABC app. It was never on Hulu, but now it's on Disney Plus. And there's really only 3 episodes I really enjoy the most. And so like those are the ones I have like recorded on VHS that got converted to DVD. So I can't do a full breakdown of this series because I've only watched this twice in its entirety and stuff. And so I do remember years ago when I found it on the ABC app, it was so good to like relive this show. And but just like, the Once Upon a Time, they had to give you sympathetic villains, which really sucks. This is around the time Hollywood was doing that a lot. There was so many sympathetic villains that it's just like, let some people be bad just for the sake of being bad, And they didn't want to do that. And then there are all the cheat out deaths and stuff like that. And like, after this show got canceled, many people wanted these characters to appear in Once Upon a Time. So they started to do that, but they only did one character. Will Scarlet. He was the only person to appear in Once Upon a Time. And his story arc was really weird. Like, he was just there. He was there to like get drunk. He was there to cause problems with Rumpelstiltskin and Belle. Then he just started disappearing from the series. And it's like, well, where is he? Because he really didn't show up. And if he did, he was a background character. And then his whole thing was he was looking for the Red Queen. And so it got to the point where people's all like, well, what's the point of having him in the show? He's not really in the show. And where is everybody else at? Well, the actor got so fed up, he asked to be released from his contract, and so they did. And there's never been no resolution to the whole Wonderland story arc. And so, like, then it's weird because, like, okay, this is about Wonderland, but many of the Aladdin characters are kind of in this as well. Carpet, Genie. Genie's like a combination of Aladdin and the Genie into a character named Cyrus. And then they had Jafar himself with the steak snaff and everything, right? But then, of course, because the show is kind of like, yeah, we kind of really don't want this being canon no more. So in the later seasons of Once Upon a Time, they actually brought in Aladdin, Jasmine, and a brand new Jafar with a brand new actor and everything. Now, I don't know if that was around the time that Once Upon a Time decided to do this soft reboot of like Henry being the hero and him making up the stories and stuff like that, or if it was the regular continuity. I tapped out way before then. See, I was getting very fed up with Once Upon a Time. I used to watch it every Sunday, and this was before I knew what a Walking Dead was. And then I remember, like, I asked an online friend, like, "Oh, what are you watching?" And she's like, "The Walking Dead. What are you watching?" And I'm all like, "Once Upon a Time." I'm all like, "What's Walking Dead?" And so when I was finally able to start watching The Walking Dead, I gave up on Once Upon a Time because I was getting fed up with this series, man. Like, I gave up when, I think her name is Emma, I think. It's been a while. Became like the new Dark Lord type person. And they completely messed that storyline up where she was finally evil, but she wasn't really evil. And I'm just kind of like, are you freaking kidding me? So after that whole storyline was up, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And I only came back for the final episode of the season, and it was still a big letdown. And I just couldn't take it no more because the show started to die with me during that whole Neverland like story arc in season 3. And the show never truly recuperated after that. They started to only to screw themselves in the behind. And so, yes, I was really happy and thrilled when Wonderland came around. But Wonderland is so different from what you know. You know, one thing that's really cool about this show? This show and Once Upon a Time did something very ambitious. They utilized CGI in a way nobody thought would be possible and enjoyable. A lot of their background, I mean a lot of their backgrounds, like 70% probably of their backgrounds when they do like the fantasy stuff and the storytelling stuff is all CGI. It's just a backdrop, like a blue screen and everything. And it's weird. Sometimes it looks impressive, other times it looks terrible. And you can really tell how terrible it looks. But this was back in 2011 and 2014. And so, like, I remember when I used to watch Wonderland, not Wonderland, but Once Upon a Time, I'm just kind of like, why aren't you using real interior buildings and stuff, or at least make it yourself? Why are you using all this CGI? Like, because you can tell it's CGI. There's that glossy shininess to it. And this was on TV. But sometimes, like I said before, it looked really enjoyable and stuff. Now, the White Rabbit is all CG in this like series, and there are times when he's by himself, he looks fine, but when he's next to like a real person and real scenery, oh yeah, he looks totally fake. But I do like his redesign. He's wearing a suit and a top hat and pink sunglasses. If there's one thing this show knew how to do, it knew how to redesign its characters. And so in this episode, we get a young Alice, and she's coming from Wonderland, and she's heading back to like the real world to find like, you know, her father, to tell him all about like her adventures and all this other stuff and not to be worried. So when she goes to her old home, he is very shocked and surprised to see her. He's told her that she's been gone for an extremely long time. How many, like how long, months, years? I don't know. It's been a while since I watched it. But time really has no concept in the fairy tale world and stuff. But she's been gone for an extremely long time. And it couldn't have been that long, because if she would have looked at his appearance and be like, oh, father, why do you have like your hair looking like this? She didn't do none of that crap. So I don't know how much time it's been, but at least a couple of years. Or maybe time moves differently, you know, there from here and stuff. And so then, you know, we get into like the present day, and we see Storybrooke in the Once Upon a Time show, and we see a couple of cameos from some of those characters. Like, I think his name Grumpy, one of the seven dwarfs and stuff, and somebody else. And so, like, we see a man walking and stumbling around and heading into, like, you know, the diner and stuff. And this man has a leather jacket. This man is Will Scarlet, but we don't know that at that time. And he is played by Michael Sosha. And he has a sister named Lauren Sosha, who's famous as well, and the actress. I used to like her, but Lord have mercy, when she got arrested for that racism, ooh, no, 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 no. She basically ruined her like life and career by getting super drunk, getting to a taxi cab with an Pakistani taxi driver in Britain, and going full ham racist on him. And yeah, it's bad. Very, very, very bad. She was supposed to spend like a number, like, I think years in like jail or something like that and pay a fine, but I think they let her out early and all this other crap. And ooh, it's so bad. I don't understand people, man. Like, why do you mess up your career just for racism and stuff? But anyways, we see him and the building shakes, and then all of a sudden the White Rabbit appears, and the White Rabbit is voiced by John Lithgow from Third Rock from the Sun. And like I said before, he has a very unusual appearance. He's all CG. He has a top hat. He has like, well, a little a hat. Not necessarily a top hat, but like a hat. He has like pink sunglasses, a suit, and everything. It's very fascinating. And so basically they need to find Alice. And so like they go and they look for Alice. Now, this is the part that's very confusing. I believe that Alice is indeed from the real world. Or at least if she's not from the real world, she's from like the fairy tale perception of the real world. It gets kind of confusing. Like the whole Wendy Darling and her brothers, they're from the real world and stuff, I believe. It's a bit confusing, because the whole Alice thing, she's supposed to be a fairy tale character. But I think they have it here where she's in the real world. Now, if you leave Storybrooke, if you put under like the magic spell about it, and stuff like that, you're not supposed to have any memory. And then once you leave it, your memory is completely wiped and blah, blah, stuff like that. But of course, Will isn't affected by that because he's from Wonderland. And so him and the White Rabbit, they go looking for Alice. Where is she? She's locked up in the mental institution. Basically, what happened was this. When she came home as a little girl and told her father about all this stuff, he made her start seeing psychiatrists. But she wanted to prove that, yo, I ain't crazy. So either as a teenager or a young adult lady, woman and stuff, she went back to Wonderland to go and find proof that, yo, like this place exists. And so we get to see like a few versions of like her adventures, right? We see her running and like all this other stuff and trying not to be captured, and she's being chased by like a giant and stuff like that. And so she finds this place and she hides in it. And it turns out to be a genie's lamp. And we get to meet Cyrus. And Cyrus is the genie from Aladdin. Now this is a mashup. He's technically kind of like Aladdin and Genie put all in one. And he has a human appearance. And he's played by Mexican British actor. What is his name? Peter Godot. And so like he wants to know, yo, what you doing in my home and this and that. She's all like, look, man, you rat me out and I'll drink this potion and I'll get really big and stuff like that. And I'll tear your home. She is a feisty one. And so he's all like, he ain't gonna do that. But they start bonding and they start falling in love with each other. And so she's gonna prove that she's been in Wonderland by having that of the White Rabbit, who she has kidnapped. And so while like we see these flashbacks and stuff, she's in the mental institution talking to like, the psychiatrist and stuff. So we get like back and forth, the present and flashbacks. And then some more of like the present day, they tell her, you never was in Wonderland. You never met a white rabbit. You never fell in love with a genie. You never went to a land where you swam with mermaids, and fought pirates and like, flew and all this other crap. Basically, she went to Neverland. And so that's because like this is around the time Neverland was a thing and Once Upon a Time. So it's interesting that her and Cyrus traveled there, but there's been no mention of it in Once Upon a Time. And so like they tell her, we have a new procedure that can help you. Lobotomy. Ooh. I'm like, dude, they're literally gonna drill in her head and make her like calmer and not like believe this stuff. But she's actually starting to believe the psychiatrist. She's starting to believe because she don't want to be there no more. And she really is starting to believe that, hey, maybe I did make this all up and all this other stuff, right? Now, during this time, Will breaks into the asylum and, he's there with the White Rabbit. And she's like, the orderlies come and she's all like, no, I made you up. You're a hallucination. But she can see the orderlies like fighting him. And the orderlies should be all like, who is this man and stuff like that. They don't do that. And then he tells her straight up, he's alive. Cyrus is alive. She assumed he died. And so because of this, she no longer believes she's hallucinating and she knows it's real. And she goes into fighting mode. She whoops their behind almost like Xena, man. She's smashing people's heads in the doors. She's punching the crap out of people. She's kicking people. She's doing flips and stuff. She jumps on the door arc, wraps her legs around a man's head and twists. You hear the snappage of his neck, but he's still alive. So she must have just fractured it or something. That was brutal. And so then the doctor comes, and everything, and boom, there's the white rabbit. And so he can see, yo, the girl ain't hallucinating. So she's a little snarky too, telling like Will, oh, you called this a rescue? Because Will didn't fight. Will don't know how to fight. He's just a thief. And so they head into like a place that's secluded, and they create a portal ready to go into that of the fairy tale world. And so the white rabbit's all like, I saw him alive at the Mad Hatter's house. And the Mad Hatter was a huge character in the second season of Once Upon a Time, played by the dude who plays Bucky from the MCU. Now, he dated Jennifer Morrison from Once Upon a Time, but then they broke up. And for the longest time, he just disappeared, and his story arc never got resolved because he was in the MCU. Being in the MCU and breaking up with the lead actress probably caused him not to want to come back. And so Will does not want to go to Wonderland. He said, he pissed a lot of folks off there. And so, but she convinces him to go anyways. Now, why did she think Cyrus was dead? Well, so before Cyrus fell to his supposed death, he actually proposed to that of Alice, and she said yes. Now, he has a magical necklace, and the necklace glows when two people are like madly in love with each other. We get our introduction to Anastasia, and Anastasia is also the red and white queen. And so she is played by Emma Rigby. And so, like, she is a very cruel, evil woman. Now, she wasn't always magical. I'll get into that whenever I do a rundown of it. But like I said before, I don't know when I'm going to get Disney Plus. So, yeah. And so at this point in time, Cyrus and Alice, Alice is played by Sophie Lowe. And so like, I think she's an Australian singer, I believe. And so like, they're on like this mountain cliff, and the CGI looks really cool, right? I mean, it looks amazing. And so like, there's like an altercation between the queen and some guards and our protagonist, and she uses her magic to push him off the cliff, and then he falls and falls into that of the boiling water. So because of that, Alice always assumed he was dead. When they arrive in Wonderland, they're in the Marshmallow Marsh. And it's really cool. They're like bouncing up and down on marshmallows. And like I said before, some of the CGI is good, some of it is not. And then as they land and everything, they start to sink. And the white rabbit, he just like leaves for whatever reason. And so like, they're sinking in marshmallow, and Will is freaking out. He's a bit of a coward as well. And so she's trying to think of a way to get out of this. Now, one thing that's really cool about Alice is that she thinks very fast on her feet. And Will's all like, I can't believe I'm finna die from a giant s'more. And she's all like, what's the s'more and everything? He's all like, it's a graham cracker, some chocolate, a marshmallow, and you heat it up. So then she gets the brilliant idea of like taking a firefly who's a real firefly dragon and setting the marshmallows on fire. It makes the top really hard, and they're able to like get on top and free themselves. She's very, very smart and clever and stuff. And so they're looking for the white rabbit, but they're also looking for, of course, what's his name? The Mad Hatter's house. Well, at this point in time, the rabbit turns out to be a punk. He's working for the Red Queen. She has something of his. And so he was supposed to lure Alice back to that of Wonderland. And because the queen wants him, or wants Alice for something very, very important. Now, there's a huge backstory between Will and like the queen, and like I said before, I'll get into that later on. And there's also like a huge backstory as to who the queen stole from that of the rabbit and stuff, and why he's working for her. He doesn't want to work for her, but he has to. And so they're like, walking along and heading to Mad Hatter's house. And Will does not want to be in Wonderland. He's all like, we should just leave and this and that. But she needs his help. So she don't have no money to pay him. She pays him in the form of wishes. Now, wishes are differently here. In the Aladdin genie thing, you rub the lamp and you ask for a wish and the genie just grants it for you. Here it's differently. Wishes are in the forms of red jewels. And so like there are 3 of them and she has them hidden away in her boot, and she tells Will she'll give him one if he helps her and stuff. And so Will has a reason why he wants these wishes. And so like as they're heading to the Mad Hatter's place, they climb like a tree. Well, she climbs a tree to look higher of like how far it is from like the house. When she tries to go down, she noticed something. Her shoes are now missing and Will is gone. He stole her shoes because they have the wishes in them. And so at some point, like, she meets an old friend in the tree. She meets Treasure, the cat. And he is voiced by Keith Davis. But it doesn't sound like him. But it's him. They just modified his voice. And he is a ferocious cat who no longer looks at Alice as a friend. And he tries to like attack and kill her. Only for Will to like show back up and like try to help her out. And I think Will has like the potion that makes you smaller, and he throws it inside Cherish's mouth and he turns really, really tiny. And he gives her back her shoes that's supposed to have the wishes in them. So then they head to the Mad Hatter's place, only to see it's been ransacked and he is no longer there. And Cyrus is not there. And so she's all like, he has to be here. He has to be here. But Will is trying to let her know straight up, he ain't here and stuff. And so Alice and all them, they found the magical necklace that Cyrus had. And so like she feels like if the necklace survived the boiling water, so did Cyrus. But then, Will tells her it's magical. That's probably why it survived. But of course she has hope, so that's why she's going to look for Cyrus. There's another flashback, and one of the flashbacks shows, Cyrus falling to his doom, about to hit the boiling water, only to be saved by a magic carpet. This magic carpet is operated by that of Jafar, and he has Cyrus locked up in like a prison. And the only way to get to it, you have to fly up there and stuff. And Jafar and the Red Queen, they're working together, but they hate each other and they need something from each other. And so like, since Alice has like, the wishes and everything, and only Cyrus can grant them, then like, they need each other for that. And they don't like each other. They literally want to like murder each other and stuff like that. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff when it comes to this version of Jafar. But like I said before, I'll get into that much later. And so then we see like, our protagonists, they're walking along. I don't know, they're walking somewhere, but it's really bad CGI. Now, Jafar, he is played by Naveen Andrew. I think that's how you say his name. Naveen Andrew. And of course he's from Lost and stuff, because the creators of Lost also created this show and Once Upon a Time. And so yeah, I always found this show to be very, very, very fascinating and stuff. And I was really sad and disappointed when it got like canceled, because it should never have been canceled so soon. But they did start to muck up the storyline as they went on. Like the show's not perfect. Just like Once Upon a Time, they always end up mucking things up with like love stories and backstory and redemption and all this other stuff, and it's just the way it is. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.